Welcome everybody to the talk ArcGIS Experience Builder Tips and Tricks for Designing and Building Exciting Apps. My name is Michael Geig. I lead the app and map design team in our professional services division at Esri. I'm here joined by Joey Harig.
Yeah, I'm a UI engineer. Is this one working? I am a UI engineer in the maps and apps design team as well. I have a lot of experience with UI UX design and front-end development. So customizing and extending Experience Builder both out of the box and custom widgets and themes.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm really excited to introduce to you a book that is coming out in June. It's co-written by yours truly, so that I think qualifies me to talk here today. Since you're here, I have a favor to ask. Please fill out this survey. This is really important to us, so we get a big raise and can afford shoes for our children with this weather here. So the agenda today is we talk about the process and common mistakes when designing applications. This is really near and dear to us since we are designers, and that's something that we really want to focus on. This is an intermediate level presentation, so we are not going to talk about what Experience Builder is, what the widgets can do, but really why you're using it and how. So I will give you a lot of demos on Experience Builder basics, sizing, layout containers. We talk a little bit about the importance of branding, themes. I give you a quick demo of the Near Me widget because this is really the power horse here in Experience Builder. And we talk about small screens and optimization for mobile devices. And then Joey, one of our experts on widget development, will talk about Developer Edition and custom themes. Experience Builder obviously gives you a lot of flexibility. The way I see it, it's really a puzzle. All the widgets are the pieces, and we are here to show you how to bring those pieces together. And the goal is really to design better applications. And I hope by following along, you will see all those little tips and tricks without explicitly spelling them out. And if you want to applaud, that's fine. If you want to say, ooh, that's even better. All right, so maybe Joey, do you mind maybe going through these slides real quick?
Yeah, so first we wanted to cover our design process. This isn't only applicable to Experience Builder, but a process that we apply in every application, whether that's using an app builder like Hub or Experience Builder. You guys hear me through this microphone? How about now? Our design process is a process that we apply not just for Experience Builder, but also for other app builders like dashboards, ArcGIS Hub, and even for custom applications. So you want to see the process through from start to end to ensure that you're developing and designing applications that will be successful. The process will start with learn and plan. This is where we're going to be doing some discovery on what data do you have available, what user actions and workflows are you trying to support, what other software is there out there that's similar or different from the software you're trying to create, and how is it either doing a good job, a bad job, or how could maybe you improve or be different. We then hop into the design phase where we start thinking about things like branding, theming, layout. We can design user workflows and workflow diagrams to illustrate how our users will enter the application and achieve each step along the process to completing their goal. And finally, we hop into building. This is where we hop into Experience Builder. We might start prototyping layouts, implementing our colors, implementing user actions and triggers, filters to make the experience come to life, and start getting in the hands of users and testing its feasibility, see if we're achieving all the goals that we set. During the learn phase, we like to start with ideation. This is coming up with concepts and finding some inspiration, whether that's existing applications, things out there in the wild that you like and that you like to take inspiration from. We then go into a competitive analysis. What are some of the features that you do and don't like from these applications, things that you think you could improve upon, do better, do a little bit different? And then assessing the data availability, not just what data do you have, but what gaps might there be in your data that you might need to ingest additional data, pull in from third parties, make sure that you're set up in the long run to have all the context that you need. During the stage, you might also start to play with web maps, visualizations of your data, see what you have. When we start hopping into design, we think about branding guidelines, styles. You may already have these well-defined in your company, but there's also something you might have to come up with and search online, search for color palettes, consider accessibility for how you can apply theming and styling to your application. During the design phase, we also like to come up with wireframes and user workflow diagrams to illustrate visually what this application will look like, start to think about layout, as well as how will the user flow through it. Then we get into prototyping, where we actually start entering Experience Builder, dragging around widgets, playing with the data, and seeing how all the pieces can come together into something that really works.
Yeah, so I can take over here. At this stage, the slide that Joey just showed was really interesting because of all the pieces that go into a design, probably the final one was the one that you're thinking of when you build an application, right? That's the output. And I know, I see it in your faces. You're eager to get into Experience Builder and build this next application. But I think the point that we want to get across is that the effort and energy that you expend up front to think about the problem, to solve the right problem, really pays off in the long run. So some of the common mistakes that we see during the early stages is not thinking in the end user. It's okay to make assumptions about who your end user is, what they need to do, but acknowledge that those are assumptions. It's really important to put yourself into the end user's shoes and understand what they're trying to accomplish, because their tasks to be done, their workflows will drive the design of the application. A problem that we run into all the time is the conflicting and unnecessary requirements. You will end up in endless iterations if you don't have wireframes that you communicate with your customer. In many cases, maybe that's your boss, right? Because then they will come back and say, oh, I forgot something else. Oh, I changed my mind. So making sure that you have that defined up front is really important. Data is really important. Understand the data. Data drives functionality of your app. The map, the filters, the lists, everything depends on the data. I know when you start a project, in most cases you don't have the data. So identify those gaps, fill them as quickly as possible, and then know that once you design the application, the design of the application will feed back into the data. So decisions that you make in the design phase will drive the data. Anchoring bias means that you're too focused on a specific solution too early. So it's really important to have an exploration mindset, not a solution mindset. Confirmation bias means that you then go out and seek evidence that your solution that you came up with is the right one. So what you really want to do in the early stages is to explore the problem space. So you will focus on the outcomes. You will ask questions. What are you trying to achieve? Can you explain to me the ideal outcome, what it should look like? And how do you define success? Also, when somebody comes to you and tells you, I need this, that's great. Great idea. I have great ideas all day long, believe me. But it's better to icebox those ideas, table them for now, understand why the person is asking for it, but continue exploring. And then reflect on the people that will use your app. What are we assuming about our users? When would these people use our app and why? Ask those kind of questions. Believe me, it's really important. It will save you time down the road. So on this slide, I call it common mistakes during the later stages. I have a couple of don'ts on the left-hand side and the do's on the right-hand side. They're kind of interchangeably, but it's really important to know that your application needs to be simple. If you get feedback that your app is cluttered or heavy, then that's a good indication that you're doing too much. You probably run into this issue of overlapping and crop text a lot, and that happens when you use percentages instead of pixels. And I'll show you in our demos in just a bit. Visual hierarchy. How will users visually be guided through the application? Where do they start? What do I look at? What are the calls to actions? Very important. So placement, size, proximity, color, contrast, all really important factors here. I see a lot of inconsistencies in terms of font sizes, margins, paddings. We know that as users, we are hardwired to detect patterns and shapes. So if we see all those little nuances where something is off. Sometimes we call it the broken window theory, right? So we have this nice building, but because there's one broken window, it just doesn't feel right. And over time, the whole house crumbles apart. Don't overuse animations. Always follow brand guidelines. I cannot overemphasize that. And avoid the kitchen sink, which means just put everything on the screen. That typically doesn't work well. Just give me 1 second until so I can change my screen here for the presentation. All right. Good luck, it came back. All right. So this is not Experience Builder. This is actually, this ties into what I just mentioned before. Understand the data. The data will then flow into a web map. The web map is something that you use in Experience Builder. So when you have a data set, this is a very simple web map with one layer. It's a fun layer, fun places in San Diego. You can obviously style the layer. You can filter the layer, and this is actually really good for performance. So if you filter your layer at the web map level, you don't have to worry about it in your application. So you can, for example, filter by geography, like only show me features within zip code, FIPS, state, and so on. A really nice thing here is effects. So as you can see, I added a little drop shadow, already makes a difference. You can configure pop-ups. Inside those pop-ups, you can use Arcade. The pop-ups do not only show up on a map, but also in other widgets like the info widget, the feature info. So spend a little time in configuring this, and it will pay off a dividend. So here is labels. Let me enable labels real quick. Just a real quick tip. Whenever you edit the label style, use a color for your halo that is the dominant color of your map. In my case, that's green, so I've chosen green. So that's why all the labels read nicely. If I used black, obviously it's terrible, right? White, which is the default, also not that great. Another nice feature here is that you can define bookmarks. So here are my bookmarks for certain areas in San Diego. And then obviously you can change the base map. But what I really like is that you can share your map, and you can create an app. That's what I wanted to show you. And Experience Builder is one of them. So if I click on Experience Builder, it kicks me right into Experience Builder. I have my typical options of selecting one of those blank templates or any of the other templates. Just out of curiosity, who is usually starting with a blank template? By raise of hands. Okay. And who is starting with maybe one of those prefabricated templates? Okay, my condolences. Okay, thank you. So if I click on blank full screen, the advantage is I'm starting off with my map already pre-populated, right? So that's pretty cool. And then if I drag my bookmark widget here, I'm pretty much done, right? So here are my bookmarks. So here you see the importance of spending some time in the configuration of your web map, because then it makes your development of the application easier. All right, let's move on to sizing and positioning. One of the big pain points that I see over and over again. Let's start maybe by adding a header. And you know how Experience Builder works in general, right? You have one header, you have one footer, you have multiple pages, and you have multiple windows. Each page has a body, as you can see here, and then you can enable a header, and that's the header that you configured once, And if you enable the header on any other page, it's the same header. So one header, one footer, multiple pages, multiple windows. You can call any window from any page. All right, let's edit this header. Let's add a very simple text widget. Call it Fun Places in San Diego. I mark it. The first instinct that you might have is to format the text and pick the font size you want, for example, 24 pixels. Don't do that. You want to have heading 1. Your application wants one heading 1 and one heading 1 only. So select heading 1 in your header, and then if you want to change anything like the font size, change the font size. Also change it to white, right? And position it, right? So that already looks okay, but there's a problem. The problem is if I change the height of this window, my label will be off because the container has changed its dimension and I had placed the height in absolute sizes. So you don't want to do that. You always want to stretch anything you place over fixed positioning. And in the case of text is one of those exceptions where you do want to use auto. So you want to use auto height and auto width. So the text will always adjust to its own size, and then use this menu in the top right corner, which maybe you have never seen before, but which is really cool, to snap it to the left, adjust it to vertical center, change it to pixels, and use 16 pixels from the left. In this case, no matter how big or small the container, it will always be placed perfectly. Okay? So why did I choose 16 pixels? That's kind of crazy, huh? Because the root size of your document is 16 pixels, is 1 rem. So everything should be multiples of 16 pixels. Now, you use 15 pixels, 30, that's fine. But in my books, it's off. So you will see always multiples are of 16 pixels. All right, cool. So since we're already here, let's add a menu widget to the right-hand side. The menu widget is pretty cool because it automatically takes all the pages that exist and add them to my menu. So now we have the same problem here. We can place it absolutely, but that's not what we want, right? We want the width to auto so we can see all the options. We want to adjust it vertically center, and again, 16 pixels to the right-hand side. So no matter the dimensions of my window, it will always stick to the right-hand side. A couple of cool things here. If I, for example, want links to be part of resources, I just drop it in here. So as you can see, now resources has a little drop down. I can, I can turn on icons. So when I turn on icons, it will automatically take the icons that are predefined here. I can actually change those icons by clicking Set Icon. And maybe something you have never seen before is there's a drop down, and there's gazillions more icons, and you can go to application and choose anything that fits you, and it will automatically change it here, if that ever comes back. Okay. If you do not want to have a page showing up, you just click this little eye icon and it's gone. All right, so that's for positioning. So let's talk about layouts. So I have a little summary of all the layouts that exist. We have fixed panels. By the way, a map is a fixed panel where you can position the elements any way you want. And again, it's up to you to position them left or right. But really what you want is you want containers, so you can flow the containers, stretch them to the outer container, which is the body, and then have content inside. The idea really here is that widgets, they don't have knowledge of each other where they are positions. So as soon as you have two or more widgets whose relative location to each other is important, you must use layout containers. So a row, for example, is a good container. A column is a good container to flow content vertically. Sections is good if you want to use tabs or maybe rotating panels. And then accordion is a new one, and flow row is new too. So let's have a look at the outline here. So as you can see, we have a sidebar, which is, so let's go back to the page, expand this. So you see we have a sidebar, that's the main container, which means we are talking about a partial map layout. We have content on the left-hand side and a map on the right-hand side. I always specify a fixed pixel width, not percentages. If I, for example, use 25% of the page, that might work well on a large screen. That might be 400 pixels, right? But as soon as the screen width shrinks, 25% could easily be 150 pixels, and I run out of space for my content. So try to set the size, and then anything that any elements you have inside will flow perfectly. So in here I have my left panel, and in my left panel I have tabs. Those are the tabs on top. So I have essentially a column with my navigation, and then my section underneath. And within the section, I have views. The places view has a list. Okay, so far so good, right? So you can already get the idea. It's important to use those layout containers, and you will have this hierarchy of layout containers. So let's make a couple of adjustments to the list. For example, there's lots of lines, which I don't like. So let's just have a vertical spacing of 1 pixel and maybe no border. So as you can see, this list is already simpler. I like it a lot. Next, what we have, this is actually really cool, is if I click on one of those features, I slide out a panel. So how do I do this? First of all, my map has an action that says when a record selection changes, look at the map container, which is yet another side panel on the map. Let me just scroll here. So in my second, on the right-hand side container, I have a map container, which again is a side panel, which a left-hand side, which is empty, and a right-hand side, which is my right panel. And inside of this right panel, I have a column, because I want to flow the content vertically, with a feature info and a button. Okay, the feature info is set to stretch, and the button allows me, and is stuck to the bottom, that allows me to close it. Right? So the feature info by default only shows the selected feature. So if there wasn't anything selected, it would show me this ugly message, no data found. So what I can do is I can choose, instead of select data, I can select interact with a map widget. Now there will always be the selected widget, the selected feature selected. The close button itself has an action that triggers the map container, which again is the side panel that I have here, to toggle. So when I click this, it will close. Right? So that's how I'm doing this. How do I add this little border around my side panel? Well, when you look at the map container, and on my side panel here, I have a column, And this column is being styled to have 8 pixels to either side. So that gives me that little border and a border radius of 8 pixels. So that looks really nice. And the map container itself is set to be collapsed by default and overlay. All right, so let's take a look at this other info, feature info widget that we have here. You saw the same interaction that I just showed you before, where the feature info shows no data found by default when no data is selected. There's actually a really nice little neat trick that can prevent this. When you go to the data tab and you go to the fun layer, which is connected to this feature info widget, there's a checkbox at the bottom. I hope you see it. That's called view for empty selection. So if there isn't any selection, show the data that I've defined in this view for empty selection. Right? And here, for example, I can set a filter that says, well, show me only items that are featured, which happens to be 4. Then in this view, I see my 4 featured features, even though nothing is selected. So I don't have anything selected, that's what I see. I select something, that's what I see. All right, let's get over to branding. I told you before how branding is super important. In your theme tab, you have the default theme, and in here, all you need to do is you need to select 4 colors really. Your primary brand color, your secondary color, and the light color, which is the background, and the dark color, which is the font. And it's always the same. Forget about everything else. Okay, you have your primary color, your secondary color. Your primary color applies to buttons. Your secondary color applies to anything you choose to in your configuration. So for example, you select any text, right? You have the same palette here. You really want to select from this palette here. Avoid to select those at the bottom because they're not being driven by the theme. So you want to either select your primary color, your secondary color, which is your accent, or from any of those colors, or the text or the background. Okay. So let's just go and change one of those things. Actually, let's make it fun. Let's go and change to a dark theme. Dark themes are very difficult. You really want to use dark themes when you build applications that people use over a longer period of time, like dashboards. It's important to use colors that are not saturated, which means not pure or vivid. And it's better to use those dark themes like I mentioned for dashboards, for example. So by default, let's go into customization of those themes. You see that we have this blue and this dark. Maybe I don't like this dark color. I want maybe a midnight blue. Then what you want to change is you want to change the black of this background color. And it changes everywhere, right? If you want to change your primary color, you will have to do it here. And then what you need to take care of is, if you have any buttons like this one that I've created for myself, you want the text color to be the inverse of this one. All right, so for example, I'm choosing this one here. So now it will just work fine. Let's switch over to our landing page. So on our landing page, the same theme applies. And here I've added a nice little background video, which is really easy to do when you add a fixed panel, and on the fixed panel you add an embed widget, and the embed widget points to a video. In my case, I've added it to a file, and it repeats. I know my video is 15 seconds, so I've set an interval of 0.25. So in that sense, it always refreshes nicely. So the same thing you want to do here if you have, for example, a landing page. And here the recommendation is really, sometimes you build an application and the application has one of those modal windows that's in your face. I really don't like those. Consider using a landing page instead. So go to create a landing page. It's very easy to do. You go to scrolling page, you find the seeker template, and the seeker template will give you the framework for this landing page. In my case, I've already built that. You have a title, a search, maybe other things. And then here, what you can do is you can change the background of this to maybe an image that is really meaningful. In this case, I want to have fun things to do in San Diego. As you see, I selected this item, but my intention was to select the block which was underlying here, but I happened to select the column which is inside of a row which is inside the hero. So here's a cool little trick. I don't know if you see it in the back, but here at the bottom you have the breadcrumbs of all the elements. So you can just click the hero, and now in my hero I can change the background to custom and select an image. And here I select an image that makes sense, like this guy on the beach that's making a handstand, which immediately shows you that it's about fun things to do, in this case in San Diego. What you want to do is in the search widget here, which I've connected to my fun layer, you want to, in the search results, not show the typical results that you use that you get from the search, but you want to actually disable the search results panel, which then enables you a link, and the link will point to a page which is the map. So after I search for something, and I click on my search result, instead of showing me more search results, it will navigate to the map page, which was the original page. And then if I set my actions to zoom the map to the feature that I was looking for, then this is really what I'm interested in. So if I search for SeaWorld, for example, I click on SeaWorld, it will take me to the map page, and it will zoom to SeaWorld, and it will open my panel on the site. Okay, one more thing I wanted to show you is the Near Me widget. I mentioned earlier that the Near Me widget is really the power horse, and many of you probably have used it already. The way the Near Me widget works, it as an input takes either an extent, which is the current map area, or a point plus a radius. It feeds that geometry into the analysis. There's three types of analysis: the summary statistics, the proximity, and the closest feature. And then it displays it in the UI of the Near Me widget. But maybe what you have not noticed yet is that you can use other widgets to feed into the Near Me widget, and then use the outputs of the Near Me widget in yet another widget. So in my case, for example, I want to configure my search so for example, the search is configured to search for any place using the ArcGIS World geocoding service. And then when the record selection changes, I use that location that I found and feed it into the Near Me widget to set the location. And then my Near Me widget does its magic. And ideally, maybe I want to even hide that Near Me widget somewhere. So let's say I hide it minus 2000 pixels. So it's off screen. I don't even see it. And then my list widget, where I have specified the data, instead of looking at a layer, which probably that's what you do usually, it looks at the outputs. And one of the outputs is my analysis from the Near Me widget. Right? So if I run this and I look for anything, like SeaWorld, if I could type, SeaWorld Drive in San Diego, it will then automatically select the location, it will zoom to the location, will run my analysis, which is a 2-mile buffer, find all the features, and then filter this list. I want to show you 2 more things that you can do that maybe you have not that haven't noticed yet. You can, in the settings, go to Manage URL Status and turn on anything that you want to include in the URL parameters. For example, any of the widgets, like the map. If you had a layer list, you could turn on the layer list. Then what happens is, as you use the application, the map, the URL will keep track of what you're doing. So let's say you change the layer list selection, right? Then this becomes like a bookmark, and you can copy paste that and send it to anybody. And then when this other person comes back to the application, the person sees exactly the state of the application that you wanted it to. Now, what you could do is you could save multiple of those bookmarks. Let's say your organization had multiple departments that want to see different layers or set of layers. You could create those bookmarks by copy pasting the URL, save them in a layer, and make them available in that way. Okay, here's another example of a layout where I'm not using a layout container, but I position all the elements with fixed dimensions. So the logo, the list, and the map are fixed positions. So let's just select one here. And you see I'm setting 32, again, multiples of 16 pixels from the left and bottom. My map is 32 from the right, top and bottom. And then I'm calculating how much space I need to get a nice 16 pixels separator here. And then I'm adding 8 pixels of border radius on all of them. So this layout looks clean and nice. If I now add a nice little background image, that looks even nicer. So work with those little design details. All right, with that, I'll hand over to Joey, who is going to talk about Developer Edition.
Thank you. When considering Developer Edition, it's important to first build upon your existing knowledge of Experience Builder. Developer Edition is an extension of Experience Builder, allowing you to build custom themes and custom widgets for custom functionality. You can build extraordinary custom functionality, but you're still working within the parameters of Experience Builder. You want me to take that?
Right.
Developer Edition combines React, JavaScript, TypeScript, and the Experience Builder framework. So it's important to have a general baseline knowledge of React and TypeScript before hopping into a Developer Edition. This will just help you be a little bit more dangerous and know what you're doing. You can get a few things done without having the understanding of React and TypeScript, but like I said, it'll make you a lot more efficient and a little bit more dangerous. Before you decide to use Developer Edition, I wanted to give you guys a few key use cases and scenarios where it might be beneficial. The primary use case for Developer Edition is going to be advanced functionality. So if you're considering implementing functionality that doesn't exist with the out-of-the-box widgets, a custom widget can help you achieve that functionality. You can also extend out-of-the-box widgets if you like the layer list, but you just want one additional detail or one additional action that's not supported. You can always take that widget and extend it and add functionality to it. An additional reason for using Developer Edition would be custom theming. So if you have specific requirements for theming, such as font size or font family, that don't exist in Experience Builder, you can implement a custom theme and theme your custom widgets to have a more polished look or a more specific look that might meet your branding guidelines. And one last reason I added up here would be a custom domain name. When you use Developer Edition, you're responsible for hosting the application on one of your web servers, but you also have the opportunity to choose your own domain name. So if you're a publicly available app and you want your domain name to be something that's short and sweet, then you can choose that and customize that, which might be another good use case. On the right here, I have a couple of widgets that I've developed in the past. One being an alert handler, the ability to dispatch and show toast messages up on the screen. You might want to show metadata for a selected record from a third-party API that you can't do through an out-of-the-box widget. You might want to use what I call like a redirect to enter custom URL parameters that don't exist in the Experience Builder framework, or URL parameters that are human-friendly. Experience Builder has many URL parameters that it exposes, Mike just demoed. But if you want something that a user can quickly type and enter, indicator equals population, enter, then you can write a redirect widget to redirect and select the appropriate data records, filters, and such. Another good use case might be a user profile if you want to show a user avatar, the ability to sign out, or additional like user actions. This is one that I commonly run across. Here's a little formula that I like to use when considering should I use Developer Edition or should I consider another option. I would recommend using Developer Edition if you have 2 to 4 of these following scenarios. If you have to support desktop, tablet, and mobile, light and dark theme, you have to use external or third-party APIs, maybe you have to support multiple languages and translation. If you have multiple levels of user access, maybe you have read, you have write, and then you have admin privileges, and you need to support all those in the same application. If you have a very complex data model with lots of related tables and relationships that might be hard for Experience Builder to latch onto, or if you want a very polished UI and you don't like the exact styling and appearance of the out-of-the-box widgets, you want something specific or a little bit different for your branding. These are all good reasons to use Developer Edition, and if you have 2, 3, or 4 of these, it makes a lot of sense. You can accomplish any one of these using Experience Builder out of the box. If you want to support English and Spanish, you can have 2 separate applications. Now, if you also want to support light theme and dark theme, now you need 4 applications. Where if you go Developer Edition, you can support all of that in just a single app. If you're supporting 4 or more of these scenarios, it might make sense to write a custom application so that you have full control over every aspect from styling to functionality. Experience Builder provides a very robust framework, and you can work within that framework to save time and build really exciting apps quickly. But if you find yourself deviating from that too often and supporting maybe all of the above, it probably makes sense to create a custom application. When you decide to use Developer Edition, there's 2 options for developing and deploying your content. The first option would be to develop the entire application locally and deploy it to one of your servers. The pros of this option are you can use it in both ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. You can use custom themes, which we'll get into in just a little bit. And you also have to make all of your edits locally. So if you decide to build the entire Experience Builder application, Developer Edition, and then host that application, if you want to edit something that isn't a developer functionality, like the layout, you want to add a drawer or add a filter that isn't custom, you'll need to do that locally in your own version of Experience Builder, and you'll most likely need developer skill sets. Another option would be to deploy your widgets to your enterprise portal individually. So in this scenario, you're going to be building custom widgets locally, and then you're going to deploy those and register those widgets individually with your enterprise portal. This means that the users, who might not be developers, can come in and use the custom widgets just like they would any other out-of-the-box widget, drag it and drop it into the layout, select the filters, the parameters that they need, and they don't need that developer skill set or that overhead of installing Node, learning React, getting the application up and running. One disadvantage of deploying widgets individually is it's only supported right now in ArcGIS Enterprise. So if you have an ArcGIS Online organization, you're not able to register widgets independently. When you decide to use Developer Edition, there's several libraries that come out of the box. The first 3 being Calcite React, GMU UI, and Bootstrap. These are each UI frameworks that let you write styling and layouts really quickly. Calcite Components and GMU, you'll probably learn about a lot throughout this week, are both UI component libraries that include buttons, inputs, form elements that let you write custom content really quickly and prototype quickly and fail quickly. Bootstrap is a set of CSS classes that Experience Builder uses everywhere that you also have access to when you decide to use Developer Edition. If you want to quickly add a little bit of margin, a little bit of padding, or style something with just a couple of class names. It also comes with SCSS. Some of us might use this daily as developers, and it's just a nice to have tool letting you write your CSS in a different flavor. So you've evaluated your options and you've decided to adopt Developer Edition and write some custom widgets. I have a few tips here that'll make the development process easier and also make interacting with the widgets more pleasant once you deploy them. The first would be to use a GMU icon as your icon.svg. You can find these icons in this link here when you go to the presentation resources. But if you can also go to the client GMU icons outline folder, and you'll see all of the available icons. When you choose one, you'll see it populate in the builder interface just like any of the other custom widgets. This can help you quickly identify your widget amongst all of the others. I would also recommend building out the settings panel. When you create a custom widget, by default, you just create and populate a config file, which would be a JSON file. But you can implement a custom UI settings panel to make the configuration of your custom widget really pleasant and easy for non-developers. And you can use GMU setting components, which I've provided a link to here. They have a storybook that's really nice, and you can experiment with all their different settings components for selecting map views, selecting data sources, and putting text and all of that. One alternative that a lot of people don't know about is the option of overriding default widget styles. You may want to use Developer Edition to extend or change an existing widget. If you just want to change how a widget appears, you can use CSS to override the default styles of that widget. Let's say that you have your layer list and you just want to make it orient a different direction. You can use CSS to change the appearance of the layer list without changing the functionality, which will save you a ton of time if instead your alternative would be to rewrite your own layer list. So before deciding to write a custom widget, see if you can just alter one of the existing widgets or restyle it if it doesn't quite fit your needs or you want it to look or appear a little bit differently. A few drawbacks or just responsibilities that you should consider when adopting Developer Edition include these following. When you adopt Developer Edition, there is a little bit more overhead that'll come with maintaining and owning the application in its entirety in those custom widgets. The first will be versioning. When you use Experience Builder, either in ArcGIS Online or Enterprise, the version of Experience Builder is controlled for you, and any updates will happen automatically. These are very nice, and when you use Developer Edition, you will then just be responsible for keeping up with those versioning updates. The new features will come with the new versions, but there also might be a few changes and edits you need to make to your code based on the newest version. This doesn't only just apply to Experience Builder, but also Calcite, GMU, and even Node.js. Those are all libraries and frameworks that you need to just keep track of their versions as the widget lives and progresses. You're also responsible for hosting. So once you develop a custom widget or a fully custom Developer Edition app, you need to host it on one of your web servers. This is something that you don't have to be concerned about when using just out-of-the-box Experience Builder, but as soon as you use Developer Edition, just be cognizant of where will this thing live and where will it exist after it's been created. And the third will be maintaining. So we really highly recommend that you adopt a Git strategy, GitHub, GitLab for version control, so that you have version control over your source code, and you adopt like a developer mindset when maintaining these widgets. The Experience Builder documentation site has a really nice table just outlining what versions of Experience Builder correlate to JS API versions, Developer Edition versions, even ArcGIS Online and Enterprise, as well as Node. So if you're ever confused about which versions of these softwares and libraries you should be concerned about or you should be looking into the documentation, you can always refer to this table. We've mentioned custom themes, but quickly, what are custom themes? Custom themes allow you to customize the look and feel of Experience Builder beyond what's available out of the box. Primarily, custom themes do this through what we call theme variables. These are variables exposed in a JSON file in your theme that you can customize beyond what you can see and customize out of the box. This includes things like color, that's brand, background, status colors, and shades. While in out of the box, you can only select your primary color, your secondary color, and your background. In Developer Edition, you have full control over the entire color palette. If you don't like the exact hues and shades of some of the colors, if your brand color at its lightest hue is just a little bit too light, you can change all those in your config file. As well as typography, I have an example here of typography importing a custom font. So if there's a font that you want to use that's not one of the available options out of the box, you can use a custom theme to register and utilize a custom font. You can also control the default font size, font family, and spacing, those types of things, which will not just have an effect on your custom widgets, but the entire application, the entire Developer Edition experience, even the out-of-the-box widgets. You can also control things like spacing, border radius, box shadows, all of the above. And an important note is these aren't just defined in the config file. When the config file compiles, it generates CSS variables for every single variable that exists in your config. And you can use these CSS variables to make sure that your custom widgets are using the same brand colors, background colors, font families, spacing, all of the above, and make sure that the widgets that you develop fit into the design system of the rest of the out-of-the-box. And one note, I did mention this a little bit earlier, but if you're using a custom theme, the custom theme has to be used with ArcGIS Online. You cannot register a custom theme with ArcGIS Enterprise. You can register custom widgets, but not a custom theme. Now, there is a little bit of a workaround. If you want to deploy widgets individually to your enterprise, but you also want to restyle existing widgets that are out of the box, rather than creating a custom theme, you can create what I would call a theme widget, which would just be a headless widget. It's really just a style sheet that targets and overrides styles throughout the application. So while you can't deploy or register a theme on its own, you can register a custom widget that can take on some theming responsibility under the hood.
All right, and I know we have a couple of minutes left. So before we jump into questions, I wanted to show you real quick about mobile responsive design. There's a couple of strategies. And the first one is to know your layout transformations. I don't know if you actually were aware of that, but there are some widgets that transform from desktop to smaller resolutions. So for example, if you had a row with maybe 4 cards inside, then on mobile devices, they would flip over to a column with those 4 cards stacked vertically. A sidebar does not change, but if you, for example, set the panel width to 320 pixels, then that would still work well on a smaller device. A grid turns into tabs. A section stays a section, but for example, you can move the tabs to the bottom, which is a very common navigation pattern on mobile devices. The widget controller that usually shows the widgets as a drop-down docks the widget to the bottom on mobile devices, and the map docks the pop-up of the map to the bottom and changes the search to a full-size search. So all this knowledge is important because this UI that looks well with a little side panel that I have popping up here is very simple, but on mobile devices might break easily because now I have the search overlapping my button. And the only way to really fix that is by, for example, changing the appearance of the side panel, like I said, to 320 pixels and maybe having it with a collapse button that's available here. So if I now switch over, that still works well. Now, obviously, I have to adjust the content. Why am I showing you this? Is because your first strategy for mobile responsiveness should be to always keep auto whenever possible. As soon as you switch over to custom, you're on your own. You have to, from now on, maintain two different versions of the application, which means you really have to think mobile last. Build your desktop application first. Once you're done with the desktop application, build your mobile application. So in this case, as you can see, the header might wrap into multiple lines. Consider changing the font size to maybe 24 pixels. Still looks okay on a desktop device, but now when I switch over to a mobile device, it still fits. So that's one of those examples where you should go with auto if you can. So adjust text sizes, shrink logos, remove labels from buttons, center elements, use the menu widget that I showed you before, and then know about all those widget transformations. Then that really help you to be better at mobile development. Another real quick tip is you can use data tables to drive your content. So in this case, I, for example, have an Excel spreadsheet that I've populated with data about our team members, and I've uploaded it to our org. It has names, positions, maybe a photo. The photo is a cutout, has a transparent background, and now I can use it in my application by using a list widget, maybe a list horizontally or vertically or even as a grid. And then I can do really fancy things with it, right? So I can apply animations. Maybe I can overlay it with some fancy sprinkling effect. See, Joey, you're sprinkling. And then here's something really cool. As you can see, I have two different effects on this header. How am I doing this? So when I hover, I have an overlay, and this overlay, instead of pointing to a simple image, I'm actually pointing to a dynamic column in my feature layer. So I've added a column that is called image hover, and for each row, I've uploaded a different effect, and that's what I'm overlaying. So I can do it this way, or if I want to have it behind the head, I just switch the order here to move the image behind the headshot. I can do the same thing with colors, right? So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm pointing to an image background column, and all I've done here is I've uploaded a 1x1 pixel image with a certain color, and that's what I use as my background here in my hover effect. The overlay image points to the dynamic field of the image background. So in that way, just think outside the box. Consider, is there anything I can do to construct my data in a way that I can use it inside of Experience Builder, maybe even creating certain effects. So that's what I really like about this prototyping effort in Experience Builder. All right, with that, I know we are on time. We do have time for questions.
Yeah. You mentioned a really cool example of different departments wanting different layers per dollar. Is there a difference in performance between using what you mentioned, which is URL day, and using data view in Experience Builder? Is it really faster?
I can't speak to the data views, but if you want to show different layers for different departments or different user types, then I would recommend not using your URL parameters in case there were an alternative way that they could enter the application. I would make it a little bit more obvious on how they could access their specific group's layers, maybe having different pages for each department. That way you're not running into the opportunity to have all the layers displayed at once. That might be the best way around performance.
Is there a strategy for the ArcGIS Experience Builder online version of change management? I totally get the above position and work well with Git, but I'm wondering about the, because I make changes all the time and I find out I don't want those changes, and it's like, how do I just go back to where I started?
So the question is, what's the best strategy in ArcGIS Online for change management? What are the strategies? Right now, there is no good strategy in terms of history or even who's maintaining it. So the best bet is to really create a copy and work on a copy and then maybe archive it in terms of your naming convention. But it also means that if you work together with colleagues, you constantly have to communicate who is touching the file so you don't overwrite each other's changes and edits. So unfortunately, there's no such strategy, but that's very good feedback. Going to provide that to the product team. Thank you. So yeah.
Asked with the grid layout, and I really like the desktop one, and I really like the work well and mobile phone, and I don't like what happens in the tablet view. And I'm just wondering if there's more things that can be done there to get rid of the tablet view.
Yeah, so the question was, I have optimized my application for desktop and for mobile, but now I have to take care of tablet, right? So is there an option to remove tablet out of the equation so I don't have to take care of that, right? So I think by default, the tablet version will use the desktop configuration. And but there is no real mobile responsiveness in terms of media queries or min and max values or something. So either you make it automatically adjust to your desktop version, or unfortunately you have to maintain a third version of your application. But I would like to discuss any ideas you have maybe afterwards. I'd like to hear it. Thank you. Then we had another question.
As far as extending current widget functionality, the developer edition for enterprise analysis widget, is there a timeline in making it so that it can call custom geoprocessing tools, or is that something I would have to add as an extension to that?
That's a good question. I haven't used the analysis widget enough to know if you can use custom geoprocessing tools. One option I've used is you can use the analysis widget. I think there might be one in the SDK. There's analysis tool sets in the SDK that you can use and create your own widget to do that. But if you come find us and talk to us at the Experience Builder booth in the expo, I'm sure you can give a timeline or more detail.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
Is there any, is this session being recorded? Because when you're going through things, Experience Builder, you really go fast. Is there a recording that provided actually watching?
Yes, so this session has been recorded. It will be available to you for your watching pleasure. And there will also be slides that you can download. The slides have a lot more information. I focused on the demo today, but the slides have all this information so you can follow along. Yeah, it's part of the conference materials. You can get them online.
The presentation is being based mostly on that book, 20
No, so the book, the 20 Essential Skills, will have more information, way more. So it's structured in 20 chapters. Each chapter has 2 tutorials. So you will learn a lot. Yes, so it will reference data and apps hosted on learn.esri.com.
Can you share the book?
Yes. Let me go back to the slide. Do you have any other questions? All right, so that concludes today's session. Thank you very much for sticking around. Don't forget to fill out the form.